A man with blood on his hand touched her ring. "Take it off," the mafia boss said softly, "before I decide I'm done being patient, little saint." He did not raise his voice. Men like him never needed to. Adriana Bellini had spent 26 years restoring damaged things with steady hands and a careful mouth. She knew how to mend torn paper, faded ink, and gold leaf worn thin by time. She did not know what to do with a room full of armed men, a fiancé on his knees, and the stranger in the dark suit looking at her like the ring on her finger offended him personally. In 2 minutes, her engagement party would become a crime scene with flowers still breathing on the tables. In 2 hours, she would be inside Dante Salvator's locked house, under his protection and his rules. The secret she hid was folded into old paper and buried in church archives. It would either save his empire or finish destroying everyone she had left. Why her? In the first scene, when everyone else recoiled from Dante's blood, Adriana tore the silk ribbon from her bouquet and wrapped his cut hand without being asked. She did not beg. She did not flatter. She reached closer. Sensory motif, the soft scrape of gold over skin, a ring moving across her knuckle. Nickname, Little Saint, first used as cold observation, later as the most careful kind of love. World and characters. This title promises an Italian mafia story built around possession, false vows, and the violent transfer of claim. The emotional hook is not merely that a dangerous man wants her. It is that he recognizes before she does that the ring she wears is a lie, and the truth beneath it could start a war. The heroine is Adriana Bellini, a paper conservator and archive restorer who repairs damaged parish records and illuminated manuscripts. Her wound is simple and sharp. She was raised around beautiful appearances and private ruin, and she cannot bear being used as decoration in a man's deceit again. The hero is Dante Salvator, Chicago capo of an old Sicilian line. His wound is specific. Years earlier, he chose a meeting over driving his younger sister Bianca home himself. The car he sent exploded. He still has the last voicemail she left him. He has never forgiven hesitation. The comedy relief is Nico Ferrante, Dante's driver, scheduler, and chronic complainer. A broad-shouldered man perpetually on a cut, perpetually hungry. And helplessly in love with the estate's sharp-tongued house manager, Marta Morley, who keeps feeding him pasta he swears is sabotage. Supporting hearts in the story. Tommaso Greco, Dante's grave, watchful underboss who warns Adriana what this world costs, and Marta, who sees Adriana clearly before Adriana sees herself. The villain is Cesare Rinaldi, Dante's former brother-in-arms, not a cartoon monster, but the version of Dante that never stopped burning. Unexpected turns. The ring on Adriana's hand carries hidden history. The pages she restores connect her mother's death to Dante's oldest wound. And the man who first appears to be the threat is not the one she should fear most. The first thing I noticed was not the guns. It was the silence. 1 second before the doors opened, my engagement party had been full of violin music, cut crystal, and people talking too loudly because they wanted other people to think they belonged there. Then the doors to the ballroom parted, and the entire room went still so fast it felt like somebody had thrown a sheet over all of us. Even the violin stopped in the middle of a note. I was standing beside Gabriel near the cake table, smiling so hard my face hurt. White roses climbed the silver stands around us. Candlelight shook inside mirrored walls. My mother's ring, reset with a smaller diamond because that was all I could afford after father's debts, sat on my finger, heavier than it should have. Gabriel's hand went rigid around my waist. That was when I looked toward the entrance and saw him. Dark suit, black tie, no hurry anywhere in him. The sort of face painters ruin by making too beautiful or too cruel, because he was both and neither. He moved through the room with 3 men behind him, And every man in the ballroom who mattered reacted the same way, not loudly, not bravely, just with the tiny recalculation of prey that had mistaken the edge of the field for safety. "Dante Salvator," someone whispered. Gabriel's fingers dug into my side hard enough to bruise. I turned to him. "Why are you afraid?" He didn't answer me. He looked at the exit. That frightened me more than the name had. Dante stopped 3 feet away from us. His gaze touched Gabriel first, then shifted to me. It did not linger on my face the way men's gazes usually did at parties like this. It dropped to the ring on my hand. "I was told this celebration was private," he said. His voice was low, controlled. The kind that made people lean in and then wish they hadn't. Gabriel found his own voice on the second try. "You don't belong here." A smile moved at one corner of Dante's mouth. It wasn't a nice smile. "No," he said, "but your bank transfers did." Gasps moved around the room like mice under floorboards. Gabriel stepped in front of me, protective if you were generous, desperate if you were. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dante took a folded sheet of paper from his inside pocket and handed it to Gabriel without looking at him. "You build the city through shell charities. You sold court schedules to men who bury problems. You took money from Cesare Rinaldi while asking a priest to bless your engagement." He glanced at the altar of flowers behind me. "That last part is almost artistic." My stomach turned cold. "Adriana," Gabriel said quickly, eyes never leaving Dante, "he's lying." That was the moment I understood something terrible. If Gabriel had been innocent, he would have looked at me. He didn't. He looked at the man who could end him. Dante held out his hand. "The ring." I stared at him. "Excuse me." His eyes lifted to mine for the first time. They were darker than I expected, not warm, not empty, worse than either, attentive. "Take off that ring," he said, "before I do it myself." A pulse started hard in my throat. "It's mine." "It was your mother's," he corrected, with no visible surprise when my breath caught. "He reset it with dirty money and put it on your hand under false vows. I'm giving you the chance to remove the lie yourself." I should have been asking how he knew anything about my mother, or my ring, or me. Instead I said, "You don't get to tell me what my hand means." For the first time something changed in his face. Not softness, not anger either, a kind of sharpened interest. Gabriel moved suddenly. He grabbed a champagne flute from a passing tray and smashed it toward Dante's throat. Everything happened at once after that. One of Dante's men caught Gabriel's wrist. Crystal shattered across the white tablecloth. Women screamed. Chairs tipped. Dante turned just enough that the jagged edge missed his neck and sliced across his palm instead. Bright blood hit the linen between us. The room exploded into noise, but I was not looking at Gabriel. I was not looking at the guns now aimed at his chest. I was looking at Dante's hand. He didn't flinch. That was the worst part. Blood ran over his knuckles in a calm red line while his men forced Gabriel to his knees. "Please," one of Gabriel's aunts sobbed. Somebody near the bar started praying in Italian. Gabriel looked at me at last. "Adriana, tell them." "No," I said, not loudly, but enough. His face changed. He had never heard that word from me and believed it before. Dante's gaze lowered again, this time to my bouquet, white satin ribbon around the stems. My hands were moving before I had time to think what sort of woman that made me. I tore the ribbon free. I stepped toward a man every other person in that room was stepping away from. One of his guards shifted. Dante stopped him with the smallest movement of his wrist. Then he stood there and let me come close. I wrapped the ribbon around his cut palm once, twice, the silk staining red almost immediately. His skin was cool. His hand was heavy, terribly steady. "You should put pressure on it," I heard myself say. The ballroom had gone strange and hollow around us. I could feel people watching with the sharpened greed they reserved for public ruin. Dante looked down at the ribbon on his hand, then at me. No one spoke. No one breathed right. "You're either very brave," he said quietly, "or very bad at fear. I'm good at seeing what needs mending." The words came out before I could stop them. Something dark and unreadable crossed his face. Then he lifted my left hand by the wrist, not rough, not gentle, only absolute, and let his thumb rest against the ring on my finger. The scrape of gold over my knuckle was the loudest sound in the room. "Take it off," he said again. Gabriel made a desperate noise from the floor. "Adriana, don't." I looked down at the man I had planned to marry. There was blood on the white cloth, the diamond on my hand, the ribbon around another man's palm. And in Gabriel's face, not love, not shame, but fury that I was no longer useful in the shape he had chosen for me. My fingers shook once. Then I slid the ring off. Gold scraped skin. I laid it on the table between us. Dante watched me do it. His expression did not change, but the room did. Some invisible line had been crossed. He knew it. I knew it. He let go of my wrist. "Take him," he said. They dragged Gabriel out under the roses while he shouted my name like it belonged to him. It didn't. Not anymore. Dante glanced at the blood-soaked ribbon, then back at me. "Come with me, little saint. If Cesare thinks Gabriel told you anything, the next men through those doors won't stop at threats. I'm not going anywhere with you." His gaze moved to the ballroom entrance, to the frightened guests, to the broken glass glittering at my feet. Then back to me. "You already are," he turned, and my old life closed behind him like a door. I had never understood how a house could feel armed before. Dante's did. Not because I saw weapons everywhere, though I did. Not because the men at the gates had the stillness of men who knew exactly where their guns rested beneath their jackets, though they did. It was the silence again, the expensive, disciplined quiet of a place built for control. The car ride there had lasted 22 minutes. I knew because I counted every red light, every turn, every breath that felt too fast in my lungs. Chicago passed beyond the dark glass in fractured gold and wet pavement. Dante sat across from me, one hand freshly bandaged now, the ruined red ribbon sealed in a plastic evidence pouch on the seat beside him as if it mattered. He had not tried to touch me again. That should have made me feel safer than it did. When the gates opened, the house rose out of the dark like something rich enough to be cruel without apology. Pale stone, iron balconies, windows glowing amber against the lake wind. Inside, the marble under my heels held the chill of evening. Somewhere deeper in the house, a man laughed too loudly and was immediately hushed. "I'm not staying," I said as one of the guards closed the front door behind us. Dante removed his coat and handed it to an older woman in charcoal gray. She had silver-threaded dark hair pinned into a knot and eyes that missed nothing. "You are," he said. The woman gave me a look that somehow managed to be both sympathetic and unsentimental. "I'm Marta," she said. "If you need aspirin, tea, or the number of a priest, ask me before midnight." After midnight I become less charitable. I almost laughed from the sheer shock of hearing anything normal. "I need my phone." Marta glanced at Dante. "You'll have it after it's checked," he said. "For what?" "For the obvious reasons." "That isn't an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight." He started walking. I stayed where I was. The foyer stretched wide around us, lit by a chandelier too old to be fashionable and too expensive to criticize. An oil painting of some severe Sicilian ancestor watched from above the stairs like disappointment had survived in oils. "I didn't agree to this," I said. Dante stopped halfway to the study doors. He did not turn at once. When he finally did, it was with the contained patience of a man who had been obeyed too long to mistake resistance for anything but temporary. "No," he said. "You were endangered by it, and that gives you the right to kidnap me. You are not in the basement. You are not tied to a chair. You are in danger because the man you intended to marry worked for Cesare Rinaldi. Semantics can wait until morning." Before I could answer, Another man came in from a side hallway carrying what appeared to be 3 grilled chicken breasts in a glass container, and a face arranged into ongoing grievance. He was broad through the shoulders, dark-haired, maybe early 30s, handsome in a way made less effective by the expression of personal betrayal he wore toward the food in his hands. "Marta," he said, "if this is another night of plain protein and steamed zucchini, I would like the record to show I serve a criminal enterprise and still suffer more than the criminals." Marta looked heavenward. "Nico, if you spent half as much energy on your job as you do morning carbohydrates, we'd all sleep better." Nico noticed me then, blinked, and instantly straightened. "Ah." "Guest," his gaze shifted to Dante's bandaged hand. "A live guest." "That's refreshing." "You're speaking," Dante said, "when silence would help you." "Yes, boss, but silence never got me pasta. Despite everything, a laugh escaped me. It was tiny. More breath than sound. Still, all 3 of them heard it. Nico placed a hand over his heart. "There, witnessed, a miracle in this mausoleum," Marta sniffed. "Go away, I would. But then who would admire you while being emotionally neglected? You're on meal prep because you lie about olive oil. It was 1 spoon. It was a ladle." Nico muttered something Italian under his breath and retreated down the hall, clutching his chicken like a grievance file. The tension in the room loosened by half an inch. Not enough to matter, enough to notice. Dante noticed too. He looked at me, and the faintest shift came into his expression, surprise maybe, that I still could laugh at all. "I want to go home," I said. His gaze hardened back into control. "Your apartment has already been searched." Ice moved through me. "What?" "By men who arrived after you left the hotel ballroom. 1 lock broken, bedroom overturned. They were looking for something Gabriel thought you had." "I don't have anything." "Then you're valuable to men who think you do." My mouth went dry. "How do you know?" "Because I taught some of them how to search a room." There was no pride in the sentence. That made it worse. Marta's face did not change, but she crossed herself almost invisibly, as if habit had outlived surprise in this house years ago. I hugged my arms around myself. "What did Gabriel tell them?" "That's one of the things I intend to learn." The study doors opened behind him. Warm light spilled across the marble. I saw dark wood, green lamps, the edge of a map on the far wall. He waited. When I didn't move, he came back to me, not quickly. That would have felt like pressure. This was worse. Deliberate, chosen. He stopped close enough for me to smell him, clean wool, night air, something colder beneath it, like metal left outside after rain. "You can fight me on every step if it comforts you," he said. "But you are sleeping here tonight." "Why?" "Because I can keep you alive here." The answer landed too directly. No ornament on it, no softening. I looked away first. I hated that. He reached past me to open the small elevator gate near the stairs. His arm brushed the edge of my sleeve. Heat moved over my skin so quickly I felt ashamed of noticing. "2nd floor," he said. "The east wing stays locked. Don't test the doors. My patience is real, but it is not endless." There was something almost calm in the way he set rules, not theatrical, just final. I stepped into the elevator, because the alternative was making a scene in front of people who already knew more about my ruin than I did. As the gate closed, Marta handed me a folded nightgown and a toothbrush still in its paper sleeve. "I'll bring tea," she said. "And your nerves if I can find where you dropped them." The elevator began to rise. Dante remained below, one hand in his pocket, the other bandaged because I had touched him. He tipped his chin once toward the ringless hand I'd curled against my stomach. "Sleep while you can," he said. It was not a suggestion. Morning in Dante Salvator's house sounded like restraint. Not quiet exactly, more curated than that. Cups set down softly, doors closing before they could click. Italian spoken in low voices, just beyond walls thick enough to suggest old money and older secrets. Even the espresso machine in the downstairs kitchen seemed to hiss with unusual discipline. I woke before dawn anyway. The borrowed nightgown had twisted around my legs. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I saw the locked French doors to the balcony, the pale silk curtains, the chair in the corner where I had piled my dress from last night, and memory came back whole and sharp. The missing ring felt stranger than the missing fiancé. I sat up and touched the bare place on my finger. Skin remembered pressure longer than the gold itself. There was a tray outside my room when I opened the door. Coffee, toast, sliced pear, and my phone laid on a folded napkin like a peace offering from someone who did not believe in peace. The phone had been cleaned, searched, and probably judged. A note sat beneath it in compressed black handwriting. No outgoing calls yet. Eat first, then come downstairs. I nearly crumpled it out of principle. Instead, I ate because my hands were shaking, and caffeine seemed easier to admit than fear. By the time I reached the first floor, the house had changed shape around daylight. The foyer's marble looked less theatrical, more unforgiving. Marta directed two men carrying flower arrangements, as if she ran a military unit with lilies. Nico stood in the breakfast room opening a protein yogurt with the expression of a man dismantling a bomb. He brightened when he saw me. Good, another witness. Marta, tell her I'm being punished for sins I haven't had time to commit. Marta didn't glance up from the silver she was polishing. You drank melted gelato from the carton at midnight. It was artisan. It was pistachio. He lowered his voice conspiratorially as I passed. She thinks love is measured in portion control. I can hear you, Marta said. I want you to. It should not have been funny. It was. Maybe because it made the danger breathable for a second. Dante was in the study. The room smelled like leather, coffee, and paper. Real paper, old, dry, faintly sweet. Shelves ran from floor to ceiling, interrupted by framed maps of Sicily and Chicago shipping routes. A long walnut table held 3 open ledgers, 2 pistols, and a crystal ashtray no one had dared use. Dante stood at the far end with Tommaso Greco, the man introduced to me over breakfast only as someone who makes sure numbers tell the truth. Tommaso was in his 40s, spare and neat, with a face that seemed carved to disapprove efficiently. He acknowledged me with a nod. Miss Bellini, Adriana, he glanced at Dante. She still thinks names help. I do, I said. That earned the faintest flicker from Dante's mouth, not a smile. A concession, perhaps, that I had answered the correct amount. Tommaso moved aside from the table. These were taken from a warehouse we raided at 4. The transfer books don't match the digital accounts. I stepped closer before I remembered I was supposed to resist helpfulness in Mafia studies. The ledgers were modern enough to be ugly, but the paper quality was expensive. The ink entries looked normal at first glance. At second glance, not quite. Who handled these? I asked. Tommaso raised a brow. Why? Because page 19 was replaced. Silence. I touched the gutter lightly. Different fiber weight. See this shadow at the seam? The adhesive is newer. And whoever did it pressed too hard, transferring the signature pattern from the previous page. Tommaso looked at Dante. Dante looked at me. You can tell that from standing there? Tommaso asked. Yes. Without tools? Yes. Dante came around the table and stopped beside me, close enough that the air changed. What else? He asked. I bent lower over the ledger and pointed. This ink oxidized differently. The top entries were written at one time. These 2 lines were added later. My finger hovered over 2 shell company names. Probably within the last month. Tommaso swore under his breath. Dante said nothing. I became absurdly conscious of his shoulder near mine, his hands braced on either side of the table, the stillness of him. I could feel him looking not at the page but at me. Why did you study this? He asked. My mother restored parish books, I said. After she died, I apprenticed with the conservator at St. Michael's Archive. I swallowed. Damage leaves patterns. So do lies. Tommaso actually smiled at that. It was quick and humorless, but still, useful girl. The phrase struck wrong immediately. Dante's eyes cut to him. Tommaso's vanished smile told me he understood the correction without needing it voiced. Dante turned a page with his bandaged hand. The dressing had been changed, clean white against his knuckles. I remembered Silk turning red and looked away too late. "What is Gabriel after?" I asked. Tommaso answered this time. "A set of donation records from St. Michael's, your church." My skin went cold. Why would he care about parish records? "Because one of our dead charities donated through them," Dante said, "and someone hid names in the paper trail." I stared at him. "You think I have those records? I think Gabriel believed you could access them. I could access all of them." Tommaso leaned against the table. "Did you?" There it was, not accusation exactly. Worse possibility. I opened my mouth to deny it, closed it again, because the truth was uglier. 3 weeks earlier, I had found a repaired folio in the archive with odd stitch marks and water damage that didn't belong. I had set it aside, meaning to examine it after the engagement. Then Gabriel proposed under church lights, and half my life filled with linen samples and guest lists, and a feeling I kept mistaking for dread, because it was easier than naming unhappiness. Dante saw the answer before I gave it. "You found something." The room seemed to narrow. "I found a page that bothered me," I said carefully. I didn't know what it meant. "Where is it?" "Hidden," Tommaso exhaled. "Christ." Dante did not sound surprised. "At the church?" "Yes," a beat. "Then we'll retrieve it tonight." I looked at him. You found it, you'll know where to look. I'm not breaking into my own archive with a mafia boss." Tommaso said dryly, "That's the spirit, very civic." Dante's gaze held mine. "You're already in this." The worst part was that I knew he was right. He dismissed Tommaso with a glance. When the other man left, the study felt different, quieter, tighter, less protected. I gathered my hands together to keep from fidgeting. Dante reached toward the ledger, stopping just before his knuckles brushed mine. Almost. "Adriana." I hated how my name sounded in his mouth. Not because it was unpleasant, because it was. "Yes. Don't lie to me again by omission." I lifted my chin. "And you?" One dark beat passed. "I don't lie when the truth will do more damage." That should have warned me enough. He had watched her bend over the page and felt the same impossible disturbance he'd felt when she wrapped silk around his bloodied hand. Not beauty. Plenty of women were beautiful. It was the steadiness. The infuriating, untrained refusal to retreat from what frightened her. She moved toward damage, as if repair were instinct. As if men like him had not spent years teaching the world otherwise. When he looked at the bare place on her finger, he wanted the room empty. He hated wanting anything that specific. I didn't know he was watching me think, but I felt it. And by nightfall, something outside the house had already begun to move against us. St. Michael's after midnight smelled like wax and old wood. I had spent 6 years in its archive rooms below the sacristy, breathing dust and linen paste, and the faint vanilla sweetness of decaying paper. At noon, it felt holy. At 1 in the morning, with Dante's men stationed outside in the alley and every light kept low, it felt like a body holding secrets in its ribs. "I can still back out," I whispered as Tommaso unlocked the side entrance. "No," Tommaso whispered back, not unkindly. "You can still regret it." Dante stood behind us, a dark shape in the candle-thin light from the vestibule. I had stopped trying to measure the ways he occupied space. He did it the same way weather did, completely. We moved through the church without speaking. Marble saints watched from alcoves. The nave held that peculiar nighttime silence churches have, as if prayer lingers long after people do. My flats made almost no sound on the stone. Dante's made less. The archive room door stuck in humid weather. It always had. I pressed my shoulder to the wood and felt Dante's hand appear above mine, steadying the panel as it gave way. The heat from his palm traveled down the grain of the door before it touched me, almost. Inside, shelves climbed to the low ceiling, boxes, ledgers, rolled plans. Framed marriage registries waiting for conservation. I crossed quickly to the locked cabinet where I had hidden the folio behind a box of baptism records no one touched, unless a lawsuit required it. My fingers were less steady than usual. Behind me, Tommaso murmured into a radio. Outside, somewhere beyond the stained glass, a car engine idled and cut. "Here," I said. The folio was wrapped in unbleached linen. I laid it on the table and opened it under the small portable lamp Dante had brought. The page I wanted looked ordinary unless you knew paper. "See these tied lines?" I said. "Someone wetted the sheet to lift older ink and write over it." Dante leaned in across my shoulder. I felt the nearness of him before I registered the sound of his breath. "Can you recover it?" "Maybe." I took the small conservation kit from my satchel: magnifier, soft brush, distilled water, reagent pen. If the undertext was iron gall, some trace may remain. Tommaso gave me a look halfway between skepticism and hope. "You carry that around." "I work with damaged 17th century paper." "The world is hostile to cellulose." A dry voice came from the doorway. "I knew she was perfect for you, boss. You love impossible people and old problems." "Nico." He sauntered in with a flashlight and a bulletproof vest hanging half-zipped because apparently vanity survived operational planning. "Also, for the record, I skipped dessert to be here. If I die under a stained glass window, tell Marta it was heroic and not because my blood sugar failed." "You're not supposed to be inside," Tommaso said. "I know. That's what makes me feel alive." Marta had sent him with a thermos anyway. He set it beside me with surprising gentleness. "Tea. She says you look pale." I blinked. "Thank you." He looked at the lamp, the folio, Dante looming near my shoulder. "If this becomes a romantic church scene, I'm leaving. I have boundaries." "It won't," I said too quickly. Dante's gaze touched my face, just once. That was enough. Nico grinned and retreated to the door, muttering, "Heaven preserve me from chemistry and sexual tension." I concentrated on the page. The reagent darkened faint traces beneath the visible writing. Names began to ghost upward, thin brown script under the newer black. My pulse sped. "Oh," I whispered. Tommaso stepped closer. "What?" I pointed. "Donations routed through St. Michael's, not charities, children's homes." My throat tightened. "Most of them closed years ago." Dante's face changed when he read one of the names. It happened so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking. Not fear, not surprise, something older and meaner. "Casa Bianca," he said. "You know it." His silence answered before he did. Then everything broke at once. The first shot blew out the side window. Glass rained inward. Tommaso shoved the lamp down. Nico swore so loudly it almost sounded liturgical. Dante caught my shoulder and drove me behind the heavy archive table just as a second shot punched through the shelves above us. I hit the floor hard enough to bite my tongue. "Stay down," Dante said. Outside, men were shouting in Italian. One of Dante's guards shouted back. Boots pounded in the hallway. Tommaso fired once through the broken window and ducked low. Nico flattened himself behind a cabinet. "I would like it officially noted," he yelled, "that I hate cardio and martyrdom equally." In the dark under the table, my foot landed on broken glass. Pain shot up my ankle. I sucked in a breath. Dante heard it. Of course he did. He dropped beside me, one knee on the stone, gun in one hand. "Where?" "My foot." He set the gun down for one impossible second and reached for my ankle. His fingers closed around it with terrifying care. Not loose, not owning, just exact. The church bells above us began to ring, not for service, but because stray bullets had jarred the mechanism. He lifted my foot into the spill of emergency light. and pulled a shard of glass from my heel. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from making a sound. His thumb pressed below my ankle bone to stop the blood. There was gunfire, shouting, Nico saying something obscene about fasting and premature death. And in the middle of it, Dante looking at my foot like injury offended him personally. "Look at me," he said. I did. "Breathe." I obeyed before I had time to resent it. Outside the archive, one of the attackers cried out. Another fell silent too suddenly. Dante wrapped gauze around my heel from the same small medical kit I used for paper. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "No," he said, "but you are." His hand remained around my ankle a second too long, almost. Then he let go, picked up his gun, and stood in one motion. Tommaso kicked a dropped weapon away from the doorway. "They're pulling back." Nico slowly unfolded himself from the floor. "Wonderful. If everyone is done ruining sacred architecture, I'd like a sandwich." Dante ignored him. His gaze stayed on the recovered names on the page. Fast mystery closed. Gabriel had not just been dirty. He had been looking for a record tied to houses that disappeared children and money. Something much older had found us first. When Dante helped me up, he did not remove his hand from my elbow until we reached the door. I felt its absence all the way home. I did not mean to keep another secret. That was the thing I told myself all morning while rain slid down the library windows and men with guns pretended to read newspapers in Dante's breakfast room. But some truths take shape slowly. They do not arrive as confession. They arrive as a pattern you suddenly recognize in the damage. The folio from St. Michael's had not only held donation names. When I examined the sewing on the spine more closely after the church attack, I found something folded into the hollow. A strip of rag paper no wider than 2 fingers, sealed by age and paste. I did not show it to Dante immediately, not because I trusted Gabriel, not because I wanted to keep anything from the man currently stationing guards outside my door, but because the handwriting on that hidden strip was my mother's. I knew it at once. She looped her capital LS too far left. She pressed hardest on the downward stem of her BS. I had spent childhood watching those letters form grocery lists and rent calculations and birthday notes pinned beside my lunch. So I carried the strip to the little conservation table Marta had let me set up in an unused sunroom, and opened it there with steam and tweezers and shaking hands. By noon I had enough to know it was worse than I feared. By 1, Dante found me. The sunroom overlooked the side garden, where clipped hedges attempted dignity against lake wind. Trays of Japanese tissue, wheat paste, and linen blotters covered the table. The hidden strip lay under glass. Dante stopped in the doorway. He looked from my face to the tools to the paper. "You didn't bring this to me," I swallowed. I needed to be sure. His gaze lowered to the handwriting. "Were you? It's my mother S." The words changed the room. He came closer, not fast. Never fast. His bandaged hand rested at his side, freshly dressed again. I hated that I noticed the care of the wrapping. "What does it say?" he asked. My mouth felt dry. "She wrote that someone named CR was moving money through St. Michael's years ago, that he used children's homes to hide shipments." I forced the next part out. "She wrote she was afraid because she had seen the original donor list before it was altered." Dante's jaw tightened. "She also wrote," I said, "that if anything happened to her, the names were copied into another register under gold leaf repairs." A beat. "Why keep this from me? Because every time I hand you a truth, somebody gets hurt." His gaze held mine without blinking. "People are already getting hurt." He wasn't wrong. I hated him a little for being right at the exact angle I couldn't deflect. "I found something else," I said quietly. From the drawer beneath the table, I took the repaired prayer card folder I had been working on since morning. It was an 18th century saint image, badly burned at one corner, its painted halo cracked. I had lined the back with near-invisible tissue and mended the split with wheat paste so fine the seam only showed if you knew where pain sat inside a page. Dante looked at it, then at me. "I know," I said. "It's not what matters, but the repair does." I turned it over and showed him. If a page burns through the center, you cannot force strength onto the surface. It tears again. The support has to go underneath, quietly, where no one sees it. My voice went softer without permission. "Otherwise it only looks whole." For the first time since I'd met him, he looked at me like he had heard more than I meant to say. Neither of us moved, almost. A knock sounded against the half-open door. Tommaso entered, carrying 2 folders and suspicion like a second coat. His eyes went from the hidden strip to the Saint card to Dante. "Bad time?" "Yes," I said. "No," Dante said at the same time. Tommaso set the folders down. "We found Gabriel," my stomach lurched. "Alive, for now." Tommaso's expression did not shift. "He says he never told Cesare about the hidden note. Says only one person besides him had access to the transfer ledgers." "Who?" Tommaso's mouth thinned. "Me." Silence. I stared at him. Tommaso held my gaze. "If I were the traitor, Miss Bellini, you'd be dead already. But suspicion doesn't wait for fairness." Dante said nothing for 2 full seconds. I watched the cost of that silence move through the room like cold water. Then the intercom on the wall crackled. Nico's voice burst through, strained and irritated in equal measure. "Boss, respectfully. Marta has weaponized Linguini against my cutting phase, and also there's a federal sedan parked 2 blocks down with 1 man pretending to read and another pretending not to stare at our gate." Tommaso swore. Dante hit the talk button. "Keep eyes on them, no contact." "Wonderful," Nico said. "Government and gluten today continues to insult me." The line went dead. I should not have smiled. I did a little. Tommaso noticed and looked momentarily offended by the existence of humor. "Show me the rest," Dante said, so I did. I showed him the note. I showed him the mark beneath the gold leaf in the old register, where names might be hidden. I showed him what my mother had tried to preserve beneath layers of correction and fear. By evening, we had a plan to recover the second register from the church annex. By night, that plan would fail because of me. I insisted on going through the back alley instead of the main side door because I knew the annex windows stuck and the lock could be eased without damage. It was practical, efficient, stupid. The alley already held men waiting for us. The first gunshot hit brick above my head. Dante's hand slammed hard against my spine, driving me behind the dumpster before I even understood the shape of the ambush. Tommaso fired. A man fell. Another shouted from the fire escape. "Inside," Dante snapped. We ran, or rather they ran and dragged me through terror with them. Later, when the worst of it was over, and one of the attackers had escaped with blood on the pavement behind him, Dante stood in the annex doorway with rain dripping from his hair, and looked at me with something far more frightening than anger. "Disappointment. You do not improvise around me again," he said. I was trying to help. "You nearly got Tommaso killed." Tommaso, bleeding from a crease in his shoulder, muttered, "She also nearly got me exercise." I object equally. But the damage was done. For the first time since the ballroom, I knew I had made a mistake big enough to matter, and Dante did not forgive it. The safe room did not feel safe. It felt like the inside of a held breath. Concrete walls, a steel door thick enough to insult hope, 2 leather chairs bolted to the floor, and a narrow couch that looked as if no one had ever trusted themselves enough to sleep on it. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, spent gunpowder, and the storm still raging against the lake outside. Tommaso's shoulder had been stitched upstairs. Nico had announced, while helping strip bloody shirts from the foyer floor, that if anyone bled on Marta's Persian runner again, he would defect to Switzerland and become a pastry chef. Marta told him Switzerland would send him back, And Dante had put me in the safe room with him because Cesar's men had followed us too closely to risk distance. He closed the door. The lock engaged with the deep mechanical certainty of money, engineering, and paranoia. I stood with my back to the wall and tried not to shake. I said I was sorry, I whispered. He loosened his tie, his knuckles were cut, rain darkened the shoulders of his shirt. I heard you. That's all, he looked at me then, really looked, not at my hands, not at the room around me. At me, tired and angry and too alive after the alley. What did you want? He asked. Comfort. I don't give it while the danger is still warm. My throat tightened. You think I don't know that? He took a step closer. I think you still believe mistakes only belong to you. For a second I forgot to breathe. He turned away first, dragging one hand over the back of his neck. A scar showed at the base, pale against his skin before his collar shifted back into place. I had seen glimpses of marks on him before, never asked. Some questions know when they would become intimacy if spoken aloud. Rain hammered the house. I know about Bianca, I said softly. His stillness altered. Marta had told me only because she found me sitting on the laundry room floor after the ambush, holding a roll of bandage I had not used. She did not give details. Only enough to explain why Dante lost years from his face whenever a convoy route changed at the last minute. He shouldn't have told you, Dante said. He didn't. That drew his head around. Marta, yes. A brief, nearly invisible exhale, not anger, acceptance that his house had decided something on his behalf. I moved closer before I had fully decided to. She said your sister died because someone changed a route. His eyes were unreadable. She died because I let someone else drive her. There was the specific wound at last, stripped of ornament. He had not been there, that was the blade. I'm sorry, I said, I know. Not cold, worse, tired. I stopped an arm's length away, near enough now to see where one cut on his knuckles had reopened. Blood welled dark against skin. Without thinking, I reached for the medical tin on the shelf. His hand closed around my wrist. Everything in me went still. He did not grip hard. He did not let go. Don't, he said. Why? His gaze dropped to my fingers, then lifted back to my face. Because you do that and I forget useful things. I could hear the rain, the lock, my own pulse. The exact weight of his hand around my wrist. I'm only bandaging you, I whispered. That's not what you do. The room tilted slightly. I did not understand him. I understood too much. What do I do? For one terrible second I thought he would refuse the answer. Then something in him gave, not outwardly, only enough that the truth came through. It had been the ribbon. Not the party, not the ring, not the insult of seeing another man's claim on her hand. The ribbon, the way she had looked at blood and reached closer. No flinch, no bargain. She had touched him like damage was a thing to be tended, not feared. No one in his world did that. No one alive. And he had been thinking about it ever since. He released my wrist slowly. You see the wound first, he said, voice rougher now. You always do. I stared at him. You did it at the ballroom. You did it in the church. You're doing it now. He looked at the medical tin instead of me. It is not a skill I can afford you having where I'm concerned, little saint. The nickname landed differently this time, not colder. More dangerous because it was. I picked up the tin anyway. He let me. I cleaned the cut on his knuckles with shaking hands. He stood so still I could feel the effort it cost him. When I wrapped the bandage, my fingertips brushed the inside of his wrist. His breath changed, only slightly. It was enough to burn. When I finished, I should have stepped back. I didn't, almost. His free hand lifted, stopped beside my cheek, lowered again, almost. I don't know what happens next, I said, and hated how exposed it sounded. His voice dropped. Neither do I. That frightened me more than certainty would have. So when I looked up and found him already looking at my mouth, the fear in me did not say no. It said very softly, don't be careful just because you think I'll break. He closed his eyes once briefly, as if the sentence had cost him something too. Then he bent and kissed me. Not hard. Not claiming. Worse than both. Controlled right up to the point where control became visible. His mouth touched mine like he was asking a question he did not trust himself to ask aloud. I had never been kissed by someone who knew what restraint was worth. Gabriel had always kissed like a man checking a box on a list of expected tenderness. This was not expected. This was chosen and then interrupted by choice again, because Dante made a sound low in his throat and pulled back first. Forehead against mine. Breath unsteady for the first time. "If I start," he said, "I won't stop soon enough for my own standards." I think that was the moment something in me moved permanently, not because he kissed me, because he stopped. The intercom buzzed. Nico's voice strained and theatrically miserable. "Boss, terrible news. We have confirmation Cesare moved 3 cars south, and also Marta says if I eat one more emergency biscotti, I can forget about seeing my abs before Christmas." Dante's eyes closed once against my forehead. I laughed into the space between us because I could not help it. When he stepped back, the room felt colder immediately. "War is here," he said. And this time there was no door left to shut against it. War changed the house first, not with shouting, with absence. By the second day, half the faces I had seen at breakfast were gone to warehouses, routes, meetings, safe apartments. The kitchen ran at all hours. Phones vibrated against tabletops and were answered in hallways, with voices lowered to a murmur too careful for good news. The gates opened and closed like mechanical lungs. Rain gave way to hard autumn light, and still nobody relaxed. Tommaso wore his arm in a sling and lied about pain with professional dignity. Marta moved through the corridors, as if she had personally decided bullets were not allowed on polished floors. Nico developed a habit of appearing wherever tension was highest, usually with a tray in his hands and doom in his mouth. "Please eat," he told a room full of armed men that morning. If you all die dramatic and underfed, war made the house efficient. By afternoon, the shouting had gone out of it completely. Men crossed the halls in silence with phones to their ears and jackets half-buttoned over shoulder holsters. The gates opened and closed every few minutes. Engines started, idled, vanished. Marta had dismissed 2 florists, 1 dry cleaner, and a cousin from Cicero with equal authority. Tommaso was working from the study with his injured arm in a sling, and the sort of grim focus that made everyone around him speak more carefully. Nico had taken it upon himself to deliver coffee like a resentful archangel. Nobody said the word war. They didn't have to. I stood in the dressing room of the East guest suite with a small bag open on the bed and 3 dresses folded inside it, none of them mine. A passport sat beside a burner phone I had not asked for. Beneath both lay a train ticket under another name. Marta watched from the doorway with her arms folded. "So that's it?" I asked. "I get smuggled out like delicate cargo. You get moved somewhere Cesare can't reach by dinner," she said. "You can be insulted by the phrasing later." "Did Dante decide this for me too?" Marta's mouth thinned. "He decided to give you a door. In this house that is practically romance." I looked back at the bag. Leaving should have felt like relief. It felt like an eraser held over the page. As if every dead woman in this story would remain dead and useful while the living were quietly arranged elsewhere. Where would I go? A convent guest house near Lake Geneva for 2 nights. Then farther if needed. A laugh nearly escaped me. "Of course it's a convent," Marta shrugged. "You have the face for stained glass and terrible timing." When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. The bare finger still bothered me more than it should have. Skin remembered the weight of the ring with humiliating fidelity. Sometimes I caught my thumb brushing the place where gold had rested and felt anger so sharp, it seemed stupid to call it grief. On the desk near the window lay a folder I didn't remember seeing earlier. probably left there by Tommaso or one of the men carrying papers in and out of the room all day. I should have ignored it. I didn't. Inside was a typed transcript, creased at the corners from repeated handling. Bianca Salvator voicemail, 11:14 p.m. My pulse stumbled. I read the first 2 lines before guilt should have stopped me. It didn't. Dante, if you get this, don't call back. I'm with Livia Bellini. She was right about the register. If anything happens, it's Sardo, not Gabriel, not the charities. Sardo, the rest of the page had been worn so often the ink blurred where fingers had pressed it. My mother's name, not memory. Not accident, not a half-heard rumor from some old church corridor. My mother had been with Bianca Salvator the night Bianca died. I stood too fast, the chair scraping behind me. There was a knock at the open door. Dante. He took in the folder in my hand and the look on my face in a single glance. He didn't ask what I had read. He knew. "You should be downstairs," he said. "You knew." His expression changed by half a degree. "Enough." "You knew my mother was with Bianca." "Yes. And you sent me away anyway. I'm sending you away because now Cesare knows enough to come through walls for you." His voice stayed calm. That made mine worse. "You don't get to decide when I deserve the truth." "No," he said. "I decide when the truth becomes another weapon pointed at you." I laughed once. It sounded awful even to me. "How noble." His gaze dropped briefly to the bag on the bed, then back to my face. "The car leaves in 15 minutes. I took a step toward him. "My mother died in an archive fire 6 months after Bianca. You think that was coincidence too?" Something dark moved under the control in his expression. "No," he said. That one word landed like stone. I gripped the transcript harder. "Then I'm not leaving." "You are." "I'm not." He came farther into the room, not fast, never fast. The door remained open behind him, a deliberate mercy that did not feel merciful at all. "If you stay," he said, "you stay inside an active war. If I go, I become a package men move around while they decide what to burn next. That package lives. And what did hesitation get Bianca?" The sentence landed before I could stop it. For one terrible second, the room held only my mistake. Dante didn't move, didn't even blink, but the air changed. I should have apologized. I didn't. Not because I wasn't sorry. Because the question had already been asked, and both of us knew there was no polite version of it. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "It got her dead." I hated the pain in that sentence because it removed every easy reason I had to hate him safely. Down in the drive, an engine turned over. Time. Marta appeared behind Dante with my coat over her arm and a look that said she had already buried pity years ago. "The driver is ready." Neither of us looked at her. "Out," Dante said. She withdrew without argument. I stepped around him, took the coat, and went downstairs because I needed movement more than conviction. The foyer was full of late sunlight and men pretending not to watch. Nico stood near the front door with a thermos in one hand and 2 wrapped sandwiches in the other, like a man prepared for either flight or emotional collapse. He brightened when he saw me. "Excellent. Travel provisions. Marta says one is for the road and one is for bad decisions." "Marta says no such thing," Marta replied from the stairs. "She says it spiritually." At the door, the guard opened it. Cool wind came in off the lake. The car waited beyond the iron gate. I made it across the front steps, made it halfway down the gravel path, then stopped. Because the image came whole and vicious, my mother writing in haste, Bianca calling her brother, a priest's name bitten off mid-voicemail. Dante standing in a ruined life because once, years ago, he had not reached the door in time. If I left now, I would spend the rest of my life wondering whether I had mistaken fear for survival. I turned. The guards shifted. Nico muttered something delighted in Italian. Marta closed her eyes like a woman whose predictions had once again been insultingly accurate. Dante stood in the doorway still as judgment. I'm staying, I said. His face gave me nothing. That wasn't a request. No, he said. It was a mistake. Then it'll be mine. Wind lifted the ends of my hair. Somewhere behind me, the gate clicked shut again. For the first time since the ballroom, something like anger lit cleanly through the fear in my chest. I'm done being escorted away from my own life, I said. If my mother died for what's in those records, if Bianca died for it, if men are bleeding in your hallways because of it, then stop moving me around like I'm too delicate to stand in the middle of the page. No one breathed. Nico, traitor to gravity itself, whispered to Marta, I love her. Marta whispered back, everyone does, shut up. Dante came down the steps slowly. He stopped one step above me. If you stay, he said, you follow orders the first time. I'll follow good ones. His eyes narrowed slightly. It was the closest thing to amusement I had seen on his face all day. Inside, little saint. Not cold this time. Worse. I went. And when the iron gate locked behind me, it sounded less like a prison than a decision. That night the house went quiet in the way wounded animals do, not asleep, listening. Rain had started after dusk, moving against the windows in fine gray sheets that blurred the lake lights into smudged gold. Tommaso took calls in the library. Marta fed half the household whether they wanted it or not. Nico claimed rain made him emotionally starch-hungry and was nearly stabbed with a serving spoon for trying to steal bread before dinner. Dante sent for me after 10. The study looked different with only the green desk lamps on, smaller, meaner, more intimate somehow because darkness made the shelves seem to lean closer. A single phone sat on the desk between us, not a modern one, an older device, black and severe, connected to a small speaker. I knew what it was before he said anything. You kept it, I said. He didn't answer directly. Sit, I sat. He remained standing for a moment, one hand on the back of the chair across from me, as if deciding whether the thing he was about to do was wise or merely necessary. Then he pressed play. Static. Breath, a car door slamming somewhere far away. A woman's voice came through, thin but unmistakably alive. Dante, if you get this, don't call back. I'm serious. Don't. A shaky laugh. God, you never listen. I'm with Livia Bellini. She was right about the register. I found Sarto's name in the donor list and he saw me copy it. If anything happens, it's Sarto. Not Gabriel, not the charities. Sarto. Cesar's using the homes for shipments and he, a sharp sound in the background, not static this time, a man's voice, muffled, closer. Bianca inhaled hard. Dante, the line cut. Nothing in the room moved. I looked at the phone because looking at him would have been harder. My mother was there, I said quietly. Yes, she knew Bianca. Yes, rain tapped the windows. I could picture it too easily now. My mother in her sensible shoes, coat damp at the hem, jaw set in the way it always had been when she believed something ugly and true at the same time. Bianca young and brave and too visible in the dark, a priest with good manners and a rotted center, men with cars. How long have you known? I asked. Only the last name at first. Then the archive note. Then the handwriting. And you didn't tell me. I needed confirmation before I dropped my dead sister into your lap. The sentence was so blunt it took my anger apart for a second simply by refusing. Softness. How did my mother die? He asked. That startled me enough to look up. You tell me, I said. Everyone else told me it was a fire. He didn't blink. And you never believed them? No, because I hadn't. Candles were forbidden in the basement archive. My mother was careful to the point of irritation. She checked plugs twice, locked solvents in a metal cabinet, corrected my grip on scissors as if poor angles might kill us both. The official report had called it accidental electrical damage. I had read it at 19 and known only that grief made certainty feel childish. Now certainty looked back. She went in after hours to retrieve a register, I said. They said she inhaled smoke before she could get out. Dante's mouth went hard. Cesare likes fire when he wants carelessness blamed for murder. My throat closed around the word murder and would not quite release it. He saw it happen. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, "I'm sorry." He said it like a man who understood apology as fact, not relief. And for some reason, that was the thing that broke me. Not sobbing. I was not dramatic even in grief. But something gave way. A breath turned uneven, then another. I looked down too late to prevent him from seeing. Dante came around the desk and crouched in front of me, not touching, just there. The restraint in that nearly undid me more than comfort would have. "She died trying to keep something from men like Cesare," he said. "That was not small. Bianca died trying to bring it to me." "That was not small either." I laughed once against the wet heat in my throat. "You have a terrible bedside manner. I don't have one." That dragged a real, fragile sound out of me, not quite a laugh. Enough, he watched my face as if he had to stop himself from memorizing it. "I should hate you," I whispered. "Probably. Do you ever make it easy?" No. There it was again, the awful clarity of him. My fingers had curled against the arm of the chair. He looked at them, then at me. "Adriana," I hated the warning in my own pulse. "Yes, if I touch you now, it will not be for comfort." The room changed shape around the sentence. I knew what he meant. Worse, I knew he expected me to understand it and still trusted me with the truth. "I didn't ask for comfort," I said. Something moved behind his eyes. Then a knock hit the study door and Tommaso entered without waiting long enough to preserve anyone's dignity. He stopped just inside, took in the distance between us, and looked briefly inconvenienced by the existence of timing. "Apologies," he said in a tone suggesting none. "Gabriel wants to bargain." Dante stood. I hated how immediate the cold felt in his absence. "What does he have?" Dante asked. "A name and a meeting place." Tommaso set a folder on the desk. "He says Monsignor Sardo is meeting Cesare tomorrow night at the old Casa Bianca residence on the south side." The name hit like ice. Casa Bianca. I looked at Dante. He was already looking at me. "That was one of the homes," I said. Tommaso nodded. "Closed publicly years ago, used privately since." Nico appeared in the doorway behind him with a tray and perfect, terrible instinct. Am I interrupting grief, strategy, or sexual tension? Because the cannoli is arranged differently for each. "Get out," Tommaso said. Nico glanced at me, then at Dante, then wisely set the tray down on the nearest table and retreated. "I'm leaving the pastry and taking my innocence with me." Tommaso ignored him. "Gabriel also says Sardo has something he believes only Miss Bellini can identify." My skin chilled. "The second register," I said. "Or the hidden leaf from it," Dante said. Tommaso's gaze moved between us. "If we hit Casa Bianca tomorrow, we hit with full force. No improvisation." His eyes landed pointedly on me for the last part. I lifted my chin. I heard the first 27 times. When he left, the study seemed to contract again. Dante did not go back behind the desk. He stayed where he was, close enough now that if I leaned forward even slightly, my forehead would touch the front of his shirt. "Tomorrow," he said, "you do exactly what I say." I should have argued. Instead, I looked at the old phone on the desk and asked the question that had been sitting raw in me since the voicemail ended. "Did you listen to that every day?" His silence was answer enough. And because grief is reckless in strange ways, I stood, closed the distance between us, and pressed my mouth once to the center of his chest through the fabric of his shirt. Not a kiss. Not even quite comfort. An acknowledgement, maybe, that his pain had a shape now I could no longer pretend not to know. He inhaled sharply. One hand came up and stopped just beside my neck. Almost. Then lowered again. "Go to bed, little saint," he said, voice roughened into something dangerous. I did. But I dreamed of ringing phones, fire in basement archives, and a man who had kept one dead minute alive so long it had started breathing inside him. By the next evening, the house had dressed itself for theater. not celebration, something colder. The long dining room glowed under chandeliers that turned silver into weaponry. Crystals stood in military rows. 20 places had been set, though only 12 were occupied by the time dinner began. Men came in dark suits, their faces arranged into versions of loyalty that varied by tax bracket. 2 women arrived with them, and both understood within 30 seconds that they had not been invited for company. Dante had changed into black. It would have been less unfair if he'd looked merely handsome. He did not. He looked like consequence sharpened by good tailoring. Marta stood behind my chair while Nico, acting for once like a man aware that life contained stakes higher than carbohydrates, adjusted the candle placements and muttered that if one more captain wore overpowering cologne, he would resign on olfactory grounds. I wore deep green silk because Marta had ignored my wish for invisibility with the serene violence of women who know better. My hair had been twisted up. The bare finger on my left hand looked brighter than skin should. When the last man sat down, Dante remained standing at the head of the table. Conversations died. He didn't raise his voice. "I'll be brief," he said. "Cesare Rinaldi made the mistake of confusing hesitation with weakness. Some of you made the same mistake." No one moved. "At this table," he went on, "you'll hear one truth clearly. Adriana Bellini is under my protection. That protection is not temporary, not negotiable, and not available for discussion." A tiny shift passed around the room. Nothing dramatic, just calculation changing clothes. One of the older captains, Russo, set down his wineglass. "Protection is one thing," he said carefully. "Claim is another." Dante turned his head slightly. "Yes." I felt every eye in the room cut toward me. He came down the length of the table with no hurry in him at all and stopped behind my chair. One hand settled on the back of it, the warmth of his body suddenly an awareness along my spine. "This is me making the distinction clear," he said. I should have been furious. Instead, my pulse was in my throat because the room understood before I did exactly what he was doing, removing me from the category of leverage and placing me in the category of consequence. Russo looked at me, and the lady agrees. There were 100 ways to answer that question wrongly. Most of them had been written by men. I rose from my chair. The whole table watched. "Yes," I said, not softly, not shyly, just true enough for the moment. Dante's gaze lowered to me, and for one impossible beat the room disappeared. There was only the pressure of his attention, and the awareness that he had not spoken for me even when he could have. Nico, from the sideboard, exhaled so dramatically, Marta kicked his ankle without looking. Dinner moved after that, though moved was generous. It was really a series of strategic conversations in which nobody asked direct questions and everybody received direct answers. Tommaso handled numbers. Dante handled silence. I discovered that most dangerous men hated uncertainty more than violence, and that all of them noticed when Dante reached once, absent-mindedly, to move a water glass nearer my hand. It was such a small thing, it landed like a shot. Later, after the last captain had gone, and Tommaso took 2 guards to brief the South Side crew, I found Dante in the library with both hands braced on the mantel. The room smelled like cedar and banked fire. "You didn't warn me," I said. "You would have argued." "Yes, exactly." I came farther in. "Was that strategy or vanity?" He looked over his shoulder. "Both." That startled a laugh out of me. He turned then fully, and the air seemed to shift in the quiet room. "For what it's worth," he said, "I did not use the word marriage. You used something more dangerous." "Yes," I crossed my arms. "And if I'd said no in front of all of them, then I would have adjusted the plan." I studied his face, looking for the lie that wasn't there. "You would have let me." "Yes, that should not have mattered so much." It did. On the low table between the armchairs sat a slim velvet box. My breath caught before I could prevent it. Dante saw the glance and said nothing for a moment. Then, I had it returned from the hotel. I stared at the box, my mother's ring, resting there like history with teeth. "I'm not putting it back on for theater," I said quietly. "I know." He picked up the box but did not open it. Merely held it between us like an object, both lighter and heavier than metal had any right to be. "If that ring goes back on your hand," he said, "it will not be because I need a symbol in front of wolves. It will be because the lie attached to it is dead." My throat tightened. "And what takes its place?" His eyes held mine. "We'll decide that when we've earned it." It was such a careful answer I felt something in me turn toward it like heat. The silence between us lengthened. He set the box back down. I should have left then. Instead, I stepped closer. "Dante," his gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to my eyes with visible effort. "Yes." When you stood behind my chair, I stopped because apparently courage had limits after all. He waited. I hated him for how good he was at waiting. It didn't feel like strategy, I finished. "No," he said. The honesty in that nearly dissolved my bones. He reached up very slowly and touched the side of my neck with the backs of his fingers. Not enough pressure to direct, just enough to ask. My answer must have shown in my face because his hand shifted, palm warm now against skin. "Tell me to stop," he said. I didn't, so he kissed me, not like the safe room. Not careful to the point of cruelty. This one began measured and lost that battle almost immediately. His mouth was warm, controlled for a second and then not, and I felt every year of restraint in him as something tensile and dangerous. My hands found his jacket, then the front of his shirt, then the hard line of his shoulders as if I had known where they belonged longer than reason allowed. He made a sound low in his throat when I rose to meet him, then stopped, pulled back, forehead briefly against mine. "That," he said, breathing harder now, "was not strategy either." From the hall, Nico's voice drifted faintly. "Marta, if love is real, why am I being denied tiramisu?" Marta replied. "Because God is merciful." I laughed helplessly into Dante's chest. His arm came around my waist for one brief, devastating second, and when he let go, it felt less like release than promise deferred. St. Michael's Rectory had always smelled faintly of lemon polish and old sermons. That night, it smelled like rain-soaked wool and a trap. We entered through the side corridor just after midnight, not with a full crew but a surgical one. Dante, Tommaso, 2 men from the gate, and me. Nico remained in the car out front with 3 more guards and a radio, protesting bitterly that every important moment in this family happened near architecture too drafty for proper snacks. The church itself slept in darkness beyond the inner doors. The rectory office was lit. Monsignor Paolo Sarto stood behind the desk in a black cassock with silver at his throat, and a face I had known for years as patient, dry, and kind. I had once watched him bless a child's fevered forehead with the same steady hand now resting beside a pistol. That was the first true horror of him, not ugliness, recognition. "Adriana," he said, and his voice was almost gentle. "You should have listened when people told you to leave difficult things alone." My body went cold from the inside out. Tommaso moved left. Dante did not move at all. "You killed my mother," I said. Sardo sighed as if I had named weather. "Your mother was too intelligent to survive what she learned. Bianca Salvator was too sentimental." Both defects proved fatal. The room seemed to sharpen around the edges. Dante's voice when it came was flat enough to frighten God. "Where is Cesare?" Sardo smiled. A side door opened. Cesare Rinaldi stepped in wearing charcoal and rain on his shoulders. Beautiful in the ruined way only dangerous men with old loyalty in their bones could be. I saw instantly what people meant when they called him Dante's dark reflection. He carried the same stillness, but where Dante's felt controlled, Cesare's felt entertained. "Well," Cesare said, glancing from Dante to me, "you did choose beautifully." Dante's expression did not change. You talk too much. So Bianca used to say. Something awful flashed through Dante's face and vanished. Sardo lifted a folio from the desk, burned at one corner. My pulse jumped. The repaired register, he said. Recovered from the annex before your men reached it. There are names beneath the leaf. Miss Bellini is going to reveal them. No, I said. Cesare looked at me with bright, almost delighted malice. That is exactly why you're useful. You say no like it means something. A movement at the far wall caught my eye. Gabriel. Bruised, half-collapsed in a chair, one wrist zip-tied to the radiator. His mouth was bloodied. His eyes found mine with a plea already too late to matter. Adriana, he rasped. I felt nothing except a tired kind of clarity. Dante saw him too. You brought him. Cesare gave a slight shrug. He sold badly and repented too slowly. Sardo slid the folio across the desk toward me. Do the work. Dante stepped in front of me. No, the answer was quiet, absolute. Sardo raised the pistol. Everything after that happened with the vicious compression of nightmare. Gabriel lurched up and threw himself sideways into the desk. The lamp crashed. Tommaso fired once. One of the guards shouted. Sardo's bullet went into the wall beside my head. Dante had me down before the plaster finished falling. Gunfire cracked through the office. Cesare moved with shocking grace, already behind the overturned desk. Sardo fired again. Tommaso swore. Gabriel made a wet, broken sound and dropped out of sight. Dante shoved me behind the heavy wooden settle near the wall. Stay. He did not wait for my answer. I heard bodies hit furniture, the shattering burst of the window, rain and night rushing inward. Somewhere outside, Nico yelled over the radio, "This is why priests make me nervous." I risked one glance and saw Sardo scrambling for the fallen folio. Without thinking, I moved. Years in archives had taught me that fragile things could disappear fastest in panic. I slid across the floor under the edge of the desk, caught the folio, and pulled it into the narrow shadow behind the settle just as Sardo's hand closed on empty boards. His face changed when he saw me with it. Not holy, not human really, only hunger inside manners. You stubborn little, Dante hit him hard enough to stop the sentence. The pistol skidded across the floor. Tommaso took a bullet crease high in the arm and kept firing one-handed. One of Dante's men went down by the door. Gabriel, somehow still conscious, grabbed Cesare's ankle. Cesare shot him without looking. The sound was smaller than it should have been. Gabriel collapsed. For one clean second, the whole room froze around the fact of a man becoming irrevocably dead. Then Cesare kicked free, smashed the side window with a chair, and went through it into the rain. Dante started after him. I heard myself shout his name. He stopped, only because I had spoken. I knew that with a certainty that terrified me. Tommaso, breathing hard, pressed his good hand to his bleeding arm. He's heading for the south warehouse. Sardo was on the floor, one of the guards pinning him there with a knee between his shoulders. Blood ran from his mouth where Dante had hit him. I crawled out with the folio still clutched to my chest. There's more, I said. Dante turned back to me. I opened the damaged cover with shaking fingers. Under the warped gold leaf, tiny raised tool marks formed a pattern I recognized from restoration work, not decoration but indexing. Coordinates, shelf references. Transfer codes disguised as ornament. This isn't just names, I said, it's a route. Tommaso came closer, face set. Where? I looked at the repeated symbol stamped in one corner, then at the rain beyond the broken window. Casa Bianca, I whispered. The old warehouse at the home. Tonight, Dante's gaze locked on mine. War stepped fully into the room then. No more waiting, no more half-truths, no more false distance between the dead and the living. Sardo laughed bloodily from the floor. You'll be too late. Dante looked at him with such cold precision I felt fear move even through my own adrenaline. Then you should pray I'm not. And when he took the folio from my hands, his fingers brushed mine only once. It felt like an oath. Casa Bianca stood at the edge of the river, like a memory someone had tried to burn and failed. Once it had been a children's home funded by parish charity, and old Sicilian money, polished into respectability. Now it was brick and broken windows, and a warehouse annex hanging off the back like an afterthought meant for uglier things. The sign over the front arch had long since been removed, but the pale rectangle where it had been still showed through the soot. Rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet stone, diesel, and the river. Dante should not have been there. That was the first truth. He'd taken a graze along his ribs in the rectory. Nothing that slowed him visibly, only enough to anger Tommaso and Marta with equal intensity. Tommaso, arm freshly bandaged and temper running on principle alone, had argued for sending a second team first. Dante had ignored him. Nico had put on a vest, crossed himself twice, and asked if dying in an orphanage negated carb cycling. And I had gone because the gold leaf code in the register meant nothing to anyone else. We entered through the loading bay. Inside, crates stacked the concrete floor in careful rows. Some were marked as donations. Some were marked as devotional goods. All of them lied. At the far end of the warehouse, under a hanging work light, Cesare waited. 3 men with him. 1 gun on me before the door had finished opening. "Convenient," he said, as if we had arrived for a dinner reservation. "And here I thought I'd need to drag half the city to get you back." Dante stopped half a step in front of me. "It's over," Tommaso said. Cesare smiled faintly. Men always say that before they begin the part that actually ruins them. On a metal table beside him lay ledgers, cash bundles, 2 parish seals, and an old wooden box I recognized with a lurch. My mother's conservation box. He saw my eyes go to it and smiled wider. "Yes," he said softly, "she was very brave too." The world narrowed. Dante's voice came low and murderous. "Don't," Cesare tilted his head. "You know the interesting thing about brave women, Dante, men like us always notice them too late." That was the wrong thing to say. You could feel it. The men behind Cesare straightened. Tommaso's jaw locked. Somewhere to our left, hidden in darkness on the upper catwalk, one of our shooters shifted position. I stepped out from behind Dante before anyone could stop me. "Why my mother?" I asked. Cesare looked pleased. "Because she could read damage. Because Bianca adored causes she didn't understand. Because Sardo got sloppy and they noticed." He flicked a glance toward Dante. "Bianca called you. Livia tried to hide the proof. It became untidy." My hands shook once and were still. "And the children," something like impatience crossed his face. "Collateral routes, transit points, money moves where pity blinds people." I think I hated him most for how boring he found evil. Dante's hand brushed the small of my back. A warning, a promise. On the table, the ledgers waited. The gold leaf on the recovered register caught the work light in thin, cracked lines. I understood then what Cesare wanted. Not just the names, but the proof of which judges, cops, and churchmen had been paid through the false charities. Enough to burn half the city on the way down if he couldn't keep it. "Open it," Cesare said to me. I walked to the table because Tommaso had once told me courage and stupidity only looked identical from a distance. And from where I stood, there was no useful difference left. The register opened under my fingers with the familiar resistance of damaged sewing. Gold leaf shimmered over the repaired margins. I took a scalpel from my satchel. The same one I used on paper too old to survive clumsy hands. Cesare watched me work, so did Dante. Under the top layer of leaf, the tooled marks resolved into initials and dock codes, shipment dates, names, transfer banks, judges, aldermen, 1 federal liaison. Enough to cripple an empire if given to the right people. My pulse became a drumbeat in my throat. "There," I said. Cesare stepped nearer, too near. His hand came down on the page, not caring. smearing damp from his fingers over fragile leaf. The revulsion that went through me was so immediate it erased fear. "Don't touch it," I snapped. He looked amused. "Little archivist." His other hand shot toward my wrist. Dante moved first. The shot cracked so loudly the warehouse rang. Cesare staggered back, blood darkening his shoulder. Not fatal, worse. Infuriating. Then everyone opened fire. Tommaso took the left flank. Nico, from somewhere impossible above us, shouted, "For the record, I hate all of this," and dropped onto a lower crate with a gun in one hand and what looked absurdly like a protein bar in the other. One of Cesare's men went down. Another disappeared behind pallets. Bullets shredded a charity banner hanging from the rafters and sent paper saints floating through the air. I grabbed the register and dropped behind the table. Dante was already on Cesare. No grace left in it now. No civility. The fight between them looked less like combat than like history finally choosing a body. Cesare struck first blood across Dante's mouth. Dante answered with a blow that sent him into the crate stack hard enough to split the wood. A gun skidded across the floor toward me. I kicked it away just as the third man came around the table from the blind side. A priest's seal stamped the back of his hand. Sardo had more loyal men than he should have. He reached for the register. I reached for the only thing in my hand, the scalpel. It was not a dramatic weapon. That almost made it better. I sliced across the back of his hand. He shouted, reflex breaking his grip, and Tommaso's shot took him in the leg a second later. "Next time," Tommaso said grimly, "use a larger knife." Across the room Cesare had a gun again. And Dante was bleeding, not badly enough to fall, badly enough to make the world inside me go white. Cesare smiled through it. "You keep choosing women over business. It'll kill you like it killed Bianca." Dante's expression went utterly still. "No," he said. The shot that followed ended it. Cesare dropped against the crates and stayed there. Silence did not come all at once. It arrived in pieces, a shell casing settling somewhere near my shoe, Nico cursing softly from the catwalk, Tommaso breathing through pain. River water knocking against the pilings outside. Dante stood in the center of the warehouse with blood on his side and his hand and his mouth. I went to him before anyone could tell me not to. He looked down at me as I took his hand. There was blood across his palm again, the first image of him I had ever owned, only now it felt like memory instead of threat. I pulled a strip of white cloth from the torn lining of my coat and wrapped it around his hand once, twice, pulling it snug. His gaze did not leave my face. "Always the wound first," he said quietly. Yes, something warmer than pain moved through his eyes. Tommaso cleared his throat with the exhausted disapproval of a man surrounded by emotional incompetence. "Take your moment quickly. We still need to call in 3 favors and 1 honest federal contact before sunrise." Nico climbed down from the catwalk and stared at the dead men, the broken crates and the ledgers. "I would like everyone to know I was excellent." "You were loud," Tommaso said. "Loud keeps the blood moving." Marta would later say she expected nothing less. But in that warehouse, under the shredded remains of charity banners and the eyes of ruined saints, it was Dante who reached into his coat and took out the velvet box. My breath caught. He opened it. My mother's ring rested inside, cleaned now, the gold warm under warehouse light, the smaller diamond still imperfect and beloved in mine. Not Gabriel's lie. Not a prop. Mine. Dante looked at it, then at me. "Take it," he said. I didn't move. His mouth shifted, not quite a smile, something rarer. "That was the first thing I said to you that night," he murmured. "I'm trying not to repeat my worst work." A helpless laugh trembled out of me. His hand, the uninjured one, lifted. "Adriana," he said, and my name sounded like the truth of a room. "If I put this back on your hand now, it will mean I know exactly what I'm asking for. It will mean I do not want your fear, your gratitude, or your usefulness. It will mean I want all the difficult parts too. The refusal, the interference. The way you walk toward damage as if God built you to argue with ruin. My throat tightened so badly I could barely breathe. "Little saint," he said, softer now, "may I?" Everything in me stilled. Then I held out my hand. This time, when the ring slid over my knuckle, the soft scrape of gold over skin sounded nothing like humiliation. It sounded like return, like warning answered by choice. Like a vow stripped of false witnesses. Dante's thumb rested once over the ring after he settled it into place. Not ownership, recognition. Behind us, Nico whispered to Tommaso, "If nobody serves pasta after this, I'll join a monastery." Tommaso said, "You wouldn't survive the silence." And I laughed through tears in the middle of a ruined warehouse, while Dante Salvator looked at me as if the world had finally stopped being something he meant only to survive. For one impossible second it did.